At 95, Clint Eastwood no longer plays the cowboy. He just lives like one alone, silent, and staring out at a world that no longer remembers how he once carried it. His hands, once steady with a Colt 45, now tremble gently when he folds the scarf she left behind. The same scarf she wore the night they danced barefoot in the kitchen, years before her heart betrayed her. He doesn't say much anymore, not even when she died. No statement, no flowers, just a whisper no one heard at her urn. Now, each morning begins the same, a slow walk past the empty piano bench, a stare at the sea from his Mission Ranch porch, and the same 5 words to anyone who dares ask how he's doing. Now it's quiet again, but the silence doesn't come from peace. It comes from everything he's lost. The women who once loved him, the children who barely knew him, the moments he let slip by, each one returning now as a ghost in the hallways of a house that feels too big. This isn't the story of a star who faded. This is the story of a man who outlived the people he hurt, and the few who still loved him. He was once the last real cowboy. Now he's just a man trying to outwalk the sound of his own regret. How does a man like Clint Eastwood, tougher than time, sharper than steel, become so heartbreakingly human? The answer lies not in the spotlight, but in the shadows he's spent a lifetime avoiding. Long before Clint Eastwood learned to ride horses, fire guns, or direct actors, he learned how to disappear. He was just a boy in the back seat of a beat-up car, shivering under a wool blanket while his father searched for work and his mother searched for something they could call a home. They moved constantly, more than a dozen cities before he turned 10. The only thing consistent in his childhood was loss. Born in 1930 at the height of the Great Depression, Clint didn't arrive quietly. At 11 pounds, he was the biggest baby in the hospitals that week, so big the nurses called him Samson. But there was no strength in the home he entered. His father, a steel worker, lost jobs as fast as he found them. His mother, Ruth, kept the family afloat with strict rules and colder eyes. Each move meant a new school, new teachers, and new loneliness. He was the kid who always came in halfway through the year, the one who didn't raise his hand, the one who never unpacked everything because they never stayed long enough to make it worth it. Teachers called him a troublemaker. One expelled him for carving dirty drawings into a desk. But Clint wasn't trying to rebel. He was just trying to feel something, anything, in a world where connection never lasted. "You learn not to get attached," he would later say in an interview, "because nothing stays." He failed classes, got held back, wandered into the wrong crowds. But at 12, he found something that didn't leave music. A battered old piano in a neighbor's garage became his first love. He'd play until his fingers bled, refusing to stop until the keys stopped hurting. It was the first time anything in his life made sense. And it wasn't because he loved the sound, it was because the music didn't walk out on him. While other kids dreamed of stardom or summer camp, Clint dreamed of being still, of staying in one place long enough to hang a picture. But stability never came. His mother demanded perfection. His father grew quiet, detached. Emotion wasn't spoken in the Eastwood house. It was swallowed. And in that silence, Clint built his armor, stone-faced, unreadable, always calm. The boy who once cried himself to sleep became the teenager who didn't cry at all. Those early years didn't teach him how to be strong. They taught him how to fake it, how to hold his pain like a poker hand, how to look steady when everything inside was cracking. And it's that same look, cold, still, silent, that would one day become the signature of the most feared man in every Western film. But before Clint Eastwood ever held a gun on screen, he fought battles no one saw. In the early 1950s, Hollywood was a machine, loud, fast, and built to chew up men like Clint Eastwood. He was tall, sure, handsome, absolutely, but to casting directors he was stiff, awkward, and far too quiet. One told him bluntly, "You've got a face, but no future." Another waved him off after a cold read, saying, "You look like you're hiding something." And maybe he was. At the time, Clint wasn't dreaming of fame. He was just looking for something stable, anything that didn't walk out on him. He took whatever job would keep the lights on, digging pools, stacking hay, even bagging groceries at a local market. Some nights, he'd park outside studio gates just to watch who went in and out. I didn't know how to act, he once said, but I knew how to watch. He landed background roles, silent soldiers, nameless townsfolk, the kind of characters you forget before the next scene. His name wasn't even in the credits, but he was there, studying everything, the way actors moved, the way directors shouted, the way power flowed on set. Still, nothing came easy. He was fired from Universal Studios after just 1 year. They said his Adam's apple was too big, his walk too slow, his speech too flat. The rejections piled up. Friends told him to quit. One even handed him a bus ticket home. But Clint didn't get on the bus. He stayed, quietly stubborn, eating canned beans in a cheap apartment, waiting for something to shift, and it nearly broke him. There were days he didn't leave his room, days he stared at himself in the mirror and saw nothing but failure. But he kept showing up, not because he believed in himself, but because he didn't know where else to go. Then in 1954, he walked into an audition for a show he didn't even care about. He didn't smile, he didn't overact, he barely spoke, and that was exactly what got him noticed. The producers didn't see another pretty boy. They saw something different. A quiet storm. A man who looked like he'd seen too much and said too little. That's how Clint Eastwood got his first speaking part. Not by playing the game, but by refusing to. It wasn't fame. Not yet. But it was the first crack in the wall. The boy who had spent a lifetime being ignored had just made Hollywood lean in. The rise didn't come like a rocket. It came like thunder in the distance, slow, steady, and impossible to ignore. In 1959, Clint Eastwood landed a role in the TV Western Rawhide. It wasn't the lead. He played Rowdy Yates, a hot-headed young cowboy meant to support the real star. But something happened. The camera didn't just catch Clint. It listened to him, even when he said nothing. His silence had weight, his stare, unflinching. He didn't perform. He existed. Audiences noticed. Ratings soared. Rawhide ran for 8 seasons. By the end, Eastwood wasn't just a supporting actor. He was the reason people tuned in. But Clint wasn't satisfied. Fame meant being recognized at diners, getting chased by fans, being praised for lines he barely believed in. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to be respected. Then came a call from Italy from a little-known director named Sergio Leone. The script was strange, barely any dialogue, a Western unlike any made before. A Fistful of Dollars, it was called. Clint almost turned it down. Who's going to watch a cowboy who doesn't talk, he asked. But something in the silence felt familiar. So he packed a suitcase and flew to Europe. That decision changed cinema. The Dollars trilogy. A Fistful of Dollars. For a few dollars more. And the good and the bad and the ugly didn't just make Clint Eastwood a star. They made him a myth. The man with no name became the most recognizable face on the planet. That poncho, that squint, that cold drawl, they weren't costumes. They were Clint, raw, undeniable, but suddenly he was everywhere. Talk shows, magazines, headlines. Women adored him. Men wanted to be him. But beneath the global applause, Clint stayed quiet, always watching, always guarded. Fame didn't fix the wounds of childhood. It just gave him a better place to hide them. And as the cameras got closer, Clint began building his own distance. He chose roles with fewer lines, scenes with longer silences, characters who didn't explain themselves, because neither did he. He had finally found a voice by not speaking at all. But just as his name became legend, the darkness he carried began to follow him. Because the bigger the star burns, the longer the shadow it casts. At the peak of his fame, Clint Eastwood stood alone, not just on the screen, but in life. The man who played heroes with a moral code had become a man entangled in secrets, affairs, and emotional destruction of his own making. In 1953, Clint married Maggie Johnson, a quiet, intelligent woman who believed in him when Hollywood didn't. For years, she stood by him, raising their two children, Kyle and Allison, while Clint chased sets, scenes, and eventually other women. The more famous he became, the more distant he grew. The long shoots turned into longer absences. The silences at home weren't peaceful, they were hollow. And soon, Maggie wasn't the only one sharing Clint's heart or his last name. Rumors swirled. Then the whispers grew louder. Secret affairs, sudden pregnancies, children born to other women while Clint still wore his wedding ring. At least 6 more would eventually be tied to him: Kimber, Scott, Catherine, Francesca, Morgan, and Lori. Some were acknowledged, some hidden. One, Lori, was given up for adoption and only discovered her father's identity decades later. To the public, Clint was the image of control, but in his private life, he was spiraling, gripped not by addiction to drugs or drink, but to something even harder to break: distance. He built walls instead of homes, left love notes unfinished, let his children grow up without ever fully knowing the man on their birth certificate. Maggie tried to endure. For a while, she held on for the kids, for the man she once believed in, but the betrayal became too loud to ignore. By the late 1970s, their marriage was only intact on paper, and in 1984, after 3 decades, they divorced quietly, without scandal. Not because there was no pain, but because even the end deserved discretion. Clint didn't speak about the divorce, not publicly, not emotionally, but something inside him hardened. Then came Sandra Locke. They met on the set of The Outlaw Josie Wales in 1972. From the outside, they looked electric, a Hollywood golden couple. But behind the camera, their love turned cold, possessive, controlling. Clint reportedly dictated the roles she could take, the people she could see. Sandra, longing for children, allegedly underwent 2 abortions under pressure, perhaps even coercion. And when she found out Clint had secretly moved another woman into their shared home, everything collapsed. Sandra sued, not just for palimony, but for emotional sabotage. She claimed he used his power to blacklist her, to erase her from the very industry they once conquered together. They settled out of court, but not out of pain. Sandra never truly healed. In a final interview before her death, she said softly, "I kept waiting for him to say he was sorry, but the apology never came." When she died of cancer in 2018, Clint said nothing. No tribute, no statement, just silence, perhaps the loudest confession of all. Because for all the women Clint Eastwood had, he could never hold on to the ones who truly saw him. His downfall wasn't a headline. It was slow, private, and deeply human. It wasn't a bottle or a scandal that nearly broke him. It was regret. And in the years that followed, he would carry that silence like a wound no one could stitch. After decades of storms, scandals, regrets, and broken hearts, Clint Eastwood didn't find peace on a red carpet or a movie set. He found it behind a restaurant counter. Her name was Christina Sandera. She wasn't an actress, not a model, not a starlet chasing the spotlight. She worked as a hostess at Clint's Mission Ranch Hotel in Carmel by the Sea. Simple, quiet, ordinary. And maybe that's why she mattered. They met in the early 2000s. By chance, a casual conversation turned into warm glances. Glances turned into dinners. Dinners turned into something neither of them expected: a calm neither had known before. By 2014, Christina had moved into Clint's home. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't need him to perform. With her, he could just be Clint, not the icon, not the director, not the cowboy, just a man in his 80s, trying to learn how to love without running away from it. For nearly a decade, Christina was his quiet anchor. They shared long walks by the ocean, nights filled with jazz and silence, mornings where nothing needed to be said. She didn't ask for the spotlight. She asked for honesty, and slowly, Clint softened. He stopped chasing ghosts, stopped flinching at memories. In rare moments, he even smiled more easily. Friends noticed. She made him gentle. One said she made him still, but fate, as always in Clint's life, played cruel. On July 18th, 2024, Christina died unexpectedly at the age of 61 from cardiac arrhythmia. There were no headlines, no media frenzy, just a quiet passing, and a man left behind again. Clint said almost nothing. Only one line through a family spokesperson. Christina was a lovely, caring woman, and I will miss her very much. But those close to him said it all: the drawn blinds, the untouched piano, the long silences. She was his final calm, and now the storm had returned. At 95, Clint Eastwood no longer walks onto movie sets like a gunslinger. He moves slower now, a little hunched, a little quieter, but the fire, the relentless drive that carried him through decades of silence and sorrow still flickers beneath his weathered skin. After Christina's passing, something in him changed. Or maybe something simply gave up. Neighbors near his Mission Ranch estate say the piano sits untouched, the garden no longer tended. His morning walks, once clockwork, now come later, slower, sometimes not at all. Where there was once quiet discipline, now there's just quiet. But Clint Eastwood has never been a man who retires. Not really. In 2024, he released Juror Number 2, widely assumed to be his final film. Yet insiders say he's already planning another. He still reads scripts, still sketches out shots in the margins, still believes, somewhere deep inside, that the next story might be the one that makes sense of it all. On set, he speaks little. A nod here, a whisper there. Crew members say it's like working with a ghost present, powerful but fading. Physically, he remains lean thanks to decades of clean eating, weight training, and quiet rituals. Spiritually, he's become more reflective. Meditation twice a day, ocean gazing, long silences where once there were lines and lights. But even as he holds on to work, the world around him has grown smaller. His children, scattered, some close, others more like acquaintances, friends gone, one by one, awards gather dust, fan letters go unanswered, and the love he found late in life is gone. And yet he endures, not for applause, not for fame, but because to stop would mean facing the silence completely. And Clint Eastwood has always known it's not death that haunts a man, it's the emptiness that comes before it. He doesn't talk about it often, but sometimes just before sunset, with a script in his lap and no camera rolling, Clint Eastwood lets something slip. A sentence, a whisper, a sigh heavy with memory. I was always moving forward, he once murmured, but sometimes I wonder what I left behind. It wasn't a confession, it was a fracture, a break in the armor of the man who spent his entire life pretending he didn't care. But he did. He cared about Maggie, the woman who stood by him when no one else would. He cared about Sandra, even as he destroyed what they had. He cared about Christina, his final refuge from the noise. And he cared about his children, even if he never quite knew how to show it. Now, at the edge of everything, Clint doesn't ask for forgiveness. He knows it's too late for that, but he does carry a wish quiet, unspoken, almost childlike, to be remembered not just as the legend, but as the man who tried to protect, tried to endure, tried, in his own flawed, distant way, to love. He knows the movies will outlive him. The squint, the stare, the gunslinger's walk. But what haunts him most are the scenes that were never filmed, birthdays he missed, hands he didn't hold, apologies he never gave. There are no last words scribbled in a notebook, no dramatic goodbye, just the same phrase he's repeated more often these days when asked how he's doing. Now it's quiet again. Not bitter, not broken, just quiet. In that silence lives a lifetime of echoes, some full of applause, others full of regret, but maybe, just maybe, that's what makes him human after all. Clint Eastwood never begged for attention. He never chased applause. He let the silence speak. And somehow, it always said more than words ever could. He gave us legends. Dirty Harry, the man with no name, the grizzled mentor, the broken hero. But behind all of them was something far more powerful. Well, a man who lived with scars, loved imperfectly, and carried the weight of choices most would never survive. Now, Vesco, as the world grows quieter around him, he doesn't ask us to remember the fame. He asks us to remember the effort, the endurance, the quiet strength it takes to keep going, even when everything inside says stop. If Clint Eastwood's story had ever moved you, if his films gave you comfort, if his characters helped you feel seen, or if his silence once echoed something in your own life, leave a comment below. Share your memory, say his name, because even legends fade, but the lives they've touched, those echoes, never die.